Everyone, welcome to another edition of Political Power Ranker. Chris Berg, Director of Politics for Next Star Media Group. And joining me is
Spencer Kimball from Emerson College.
Spencer Kimball, Polling Director, Emerson College. That was a test, Spencer, to see if you got your name right. You passed.
And I was paying
Awesome.
attention.
I'm joining everyone from Greenville, North Carolina this week. We're doing a big debate here this week, District 1, which we did a poll on a couple weeks ago. But Spence, we're going to the most populous state in these United States of America, California. Tell us about your poll you just did.
Well, we've got a really exciting race out in California in that governor's race. So over the weekend, we had a chance to poll. And remember, as you're watching these results, these are of likely voters in the June 2nd primary. So it's not the entire state. It's not even likely voters in the general election. We're looking at these primary voters. And today we'll share with you what we're finding in those primary results.
Defining that a little bit further, primary voters more engaged.
They're more engaged and there's less of them than who will vote in the general election. So if you think about maybe 50% of voters will vote come the general, in the primary, it's going to be half that number, 20 to 30%. And that we have the most engaged, enthusiastic voters out there. So you'll see a little bit more intensity on sides of the issue as opposed to the moderates that we see come the general election.
Great explanation. Thank you for that. So let's go to the numbers. Right out of the bat with the horse race. Here we go.
Yeah, if we take a look at the top lines here, you can see that Steve Hilton, the Republican, picked up 5 points. You can see Tom Steyer, the Democrat, he also picked up 5 points since our December polling. They had the biggest movement. Eric Swalwell, who jumped into the race last month or last time we polled, he picked up a couple of points. And probably most concerning would be Katie Porter, who was the front runner in this race a few months ago. She's very stagnant and she's dropped another point this week. And we can see that the undecided number has dropped 10 points from December as well.
I'm going to ask you that real quick. Going back to the numbers, if we can put that slide back up, that's a big drop, 10%. So they're kind of filling in. They're getting more engaged. They're kind of looking for a candidate now.
They are getting more engaged, but what we're seeing are more candidates are entering the field. And with each new candidate that enters the field, there's 3 or 4 points going to that candidate. And particularly with the Democrats, they keep splintering their field. And we'll see who emerges. Right now, Swalwell seems to be the front runner on the left.
Got it. Well, as always, when we do California polling, we have the queen of California politics on broadcast, Nikki Lorenzo. Nikki, great to have you.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Appreciate it. I always love talking about this with you.
This is awesome to have you with us. Appreciate the time. So you're seeing these numbers for the first time. What strikes you?
Well, what strikes me is it seems like all of the money, the millions and millions of dollars that Tom Steyer is spending, seems to be working. Look, I know we did a poll a few months ago when he started pushing those Prop 50 ads. I believe that's what we were polling in, Spencer, just to see his name ID and what people thought about him. And he ran for president. A lot of people forgot about that. And I think he was at like 4%, but he's been able to hang in there around 8, 9% in these varying polls. And I have to tell you, his ads are everywhere. Every sporting event, every cable channel, during the Super Bowl, and it seems every week we're getting a new iteration of the Tom Steyer message, kind of building himself as this billionaire populist, which, you think about that and how do you square those two things? And he said, look, I'm a billionaire who's been committed to giving away my fortune. I also think that we need to be taxed more and that corporations, to quote him, are screwing the little guy. And I know that because of the circles that I run in, and I can be your voice, and we need change here in California. And he's this outsider running against Sacramento, and that seems to be a compelling message. But Swalwell's numbers really don't surprise me that much. He's, a darling on cable news. And as Spencer, you articulated, these likely voters that are the smaller portion that are going to vote in a primary, they're the more progressive wing of the party, the more engaged wing of the party. And since Eric Swalwell has always been an anti-Trump guy, that's a really key message out here in California.
Hey, well, let's keep this graphic up, and I want to play a little word association game with you here, real quick here. I'm going to say a candidate's name, and you're just going to give me your initial reaction, a couple words,
Okay.
based on the numbers. Antonio Villaraigosa,
Old guard.
Javier Becerra,
No one knows who he is.
Tom Steyer,
Formidable.
Katie Porter,
Hmm. Katie Porter. I mean, one word. Uh, Surprising in a way because she came in as the front runner, but I will tell you she's not doing a lot of. She didn't skip the initial debate. She's not doing a lot of press from. But what I hear, she is out doing the traditional, on the ground politics, talking to business groups, talking to unions, trying to court her base voters, hoping that this can keep her in the race despite the scandals that we all know of with her, back and forth a reporter and then berating a staffer in that viral video. That was more than a one or a few words.
but that's okay because I wanted to ask you about her. Sheriff Bianco, Republican.
He is he seems to be more of the MAGA candidate, the traditional Trump, but I feel like his voters are concentrated in that Riverside area, and he's the MAGA candidate in my opinion. More of the
Swalwell?
MAGA candidate. Eric Swalwell, playing it safe.
And lastly, the front runner, Republican Steve Hilton.
Steve Hilton, I think, is the uh, on the Republican side. I would describe him as sort of the happy warrior. He if you measure up the messages between Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco has more of that fiery rhetoric. We got to fight Sacramento. These politicians are out of control. Gavin Newsom. Whereas Steve Hilton's coming with this message of positivity. I love California. I made my life here. I love this state so much. I'm running because I want to fix it. And I want to open up and take ideas and hear from everybody. So he has more of that sort of positive message, whereas Bianco is more of a bomb thrower. But I will say those two have started to go after each other recently, and they're having social media feuds that have gotten pretty ugly, even involving the spouse of Chad Bianco having some four-letter words for Steve Hilton.
Sure, one of the many reasons I love this show is fusing your data with on-the-ground reporting. I think it's fascinating. It's just amazing. Thank you both, Nikki. Awesome analysis here. Thanks. Let's go to the next slide, which is even more good data. Spence, what do we have here?
Well, now we're taking a look within this primary of who's voting for these candidates. And to Nikki's point, so for the Republican side, Hilton and Bianco are both getting 37% of the Republican vote. So they're splitting the Republican vote. And then amongst independents, though, Hilton is winning that group with 22%. And Bianco is actually in second at 12%. No Democrat is over 11% with independents. So we can see the independents are very scattered. Tom Steyer leads those independents with 11%. And then we look at who the registered Democrats, who are they voting for? About a quarter of them are voting for Swalwell. So Swalwell gets 24%, Porter's at 14%. So within the Democratic Party, they're breaking right now for Swalwell. We'll see if he holds on to that, and we'll see if Porter's percentage drops or increases. And Steyer's hanging out at 12% there. So Steyer's hanging out with the independents and the Democrats. Hilton's got the Republicans and the independents, and then Bianco's kind of running in that more conservative lane. And Porter, I'm not exactly sure what lane she's in, but she's still got some base of support within the Democratic group.
When looking at these numbers, and we're getting closer to the June primary, when do people who are polling low across the board start thinking maybe this is not my time?
So that's oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Well, I was just gonna, that's a conversation that is happening with Democrats right now. I had a conversation with someone pretty prominent in Democratic leadership here in California. And I asked on the record, are you going to endorse someone? This person told me on the record, no. But then, on background, we were sort of having a conversation, and this person said, people need to start getting out. Now is the time. The problem is, who is that person? Gavin Newsom has showed no interest in getting involved in this race because he is involved in potentially another race. His book is coming out, A Young Man in a Hurry. So we know what that means if you read the tea leaves. But there was somebody that was very prominent in Democratic politics here, the late Senator John Burton. He was known to get all these Democrats in a room and say, you got no shot, you got no shot, you do, you guys need to get out. And who is that person right now? It's not the state chair. I don't really see him doing something like that. And all of the candidates right now, despite what they have in the bank, have told me, hey, we're staying in. We see this as an open race. There really isn't no clear front runner. And who knows what scandal can come out, what can happen that could potentially, result in someone, a no name surging. So there really isn't talk right now of anyone getting out, which they continue to split the vote.
You were going to say something?
I was going to say, even Matt Meehan, the mayor from San Jose, he just jumped in the race a few weeks ago, and he's polling around 3-4%. He didn't shake it up, but there's another 3-4% of the vote that's going to another candidate. And he's got a lot of money in the bank, or he could have a lot of money in the bank. So a lot of these candidates have a lot of money, and they keep spreading the field very thin. It's fascinating to see if they drop out, do they endorse somebody? But we've seen this a lot, the anyone but campaigns. And what always happens, it's hard to coalesce around one candidate. And that's where the left finds itself right now. But we'll see what happens on the right as well, because if Bianco was to endorse Hilton, he would clearly get, I think, one of the positions. But right now, perhaps 2 Republicans could get the positions if the numbers hold like this.
Right. All right, let's move on to another slide. You got more research you need to share with us because it's all super interesting. We've got to approve, disapprove of some pretty big names.
Yeah, so we took a look at our federal officials here in California, and we can see President Trump is underwater. Not really that surprising. Adam Schiff underwater was a little bit more surprising. Alex Padilla being above water, because 6 months ago, Padilla was really low. Nobody even knew that he was the U.S. Senator. And then he kind of came out with that Prop 50, and all of a sudden his numbers seem to improve. And right now he's one of the more popular federal officials in the state.
Yeah, this slide, Newsom, Padilla, Schiff, the prominent Dems. Anyone going to endorse?
Senator Padilla has not endorsed yet as of our conversation right now. He sort of seems to be in the same camp as the Governor Newsom, and will say, I want to wait and see how things are going to shake out. But I will say, in terms of endorsements, Eric Swalwell has not been doing a lot of local California press really since his announcement. He has been trying to gobble up all of the endorsements, members of Congress, local popular officials, and the big one, Adam Schiff last week was the most prominent Democrat to come out and endorse him thus far.
A big thing for Eric Swalwell, even if he's underwater?
Say that one more time, Chris.
It's a good thing with Schiff being underwater to get that endorsement.
Well, he probably didn't anticipate those numbers. And I have to say, when I was looking at the polling, I was a bit surprised to see Adam Schiff's numbers below Senator Padilla, for the reason that Spencer articulated. He was fairly, not very known the last time that we polled him until those Prop 50 ads came out, and that's all when we thought he was going to be running for governor. And Adam Schiff has been sort of the person from the beginning that has led the charge in the fight against President Trump, a message that is very popular here in the state of California. But again, a name known statewide like Adam Schiff, I still think that if you're looking at endorsements, that's a feather in Swalwell's cap.
Understood. All right, we have finished 15 solid straight minutes of Political Power Ranker. Great information, but we have more. Stick with us. We'll be right back with more data from Spencer. All right, welcome back to Political Power Ranker. We're talking California polling. It's Spencer Kimball, Emerson College polling director, and Nikki Lorenzo, broadcast reporter anchor from Fox 40 in Sacramento, providing all the context. Spence, we got more slides to get to, so let's get to the numbers. You've got an approval, disapproval of Governor Newsom, and it's
Yeah, I
changed.
wanted to do a little deeper dive, Chris, because Governor Newsom has been really riding a high all fall and into the winter. But this is the first time we've seen his numbers drop since April. And it looks like maybe there's a little shine off of the governor who doesn't have Prop 50 right now as an issue. And so without that issue, we see the female vote has shifted away from him. He was a plus 12 back in December. Now he's a minus 4. And he's also lost a lot of support with Hispanic voters. So right now, it looks like Newsom has come back down from his popularity that he was running over the course of the campaign for the redistricting. Nikki, are you seeing a similar situation with the governor?
Yeah, the governor is really focused now on his book that is coming out, Young Man in a Hurry, and continuing his podcast. I believe, too, that he announced over Super Bowl weekend that he is going to be relaunching the podcast that he does with a sports agent and also Marshawn Lynch. Yes, the Marshawn Lynch that you know well. And so, there's some criticism that there are some big issues here in the state of California. We have an $18 billion deficit, high-speed rail being criticized right now, that the governor is, not focused on his job here in California, and he's focused on other issues out of the state. He was in Munich for the security conference. He's going to be traveling around the country to some states that, come up when we're talking about presidential Democratic primaries like New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and Georgia, plugging his book. So in terms of issues at home, doesn't really surprise me that now that Prop 50 has come and gone, that really isn't his focus. Is issues here at home, and that people are paying kind of less attention to him.
Spence, you've got another slide about issues important to Californians, and I've got a lot of questions. I've got a lot of questions. I'm not sure we have enough time for as many questions I have about this slide.
Well, the top part is that the economy is still the most important issue. Pocketbook issues are very important. And what's percolating is threats to democracy. You can see that coming up a couple of points. What's surprising to me is healthcare has not really registered in California. We're seeing healthcare as a bigger issue around the country come the midterms, but right now it hasn't popped in our polling here in California.
So, Nikki,
Mm-hmm.
talk to us about the issues that are going down in importance. Housing affordability. That's kind of surprising to me. I mean, affordability is the watchword, I was told, but clearly
Yeah, right.
housing affordability isn't now, down about 7 points. I mean, talk to me about that. Why are that and immigration going down in importance?
Well, what I notice is that this is not the same electorate that we were polling before, where it's more general population. These folks are more tuned in. They're voters. They're going to vote in these elections. So it's a different type of person. And the housing affordability issue is really a younger person's issue. And come the midterms, the younger people vote at a lower proportion than they do in the general elections. So you're starting to see how the different people who come out to vote, those are the issues that the candidates are going to talk about. And if younger voters don't come out, the affordable housing issue starts to fade and other issues will come up, like threats to democracy, which is what older folks care more about these days, at least within the polling.
And Nikki, what do you see these numbers? What are you thinking?
Yeah, Chris, I agree with you. We all heard it was affordability, it was affordability, it was affordability. Every single candidate who's running for governor out here has made that the touchstone of their campaign. I mean, aggressive policies to deal with high cost of living, housing. I mean, Governor Newsom has been criticized for overpromising, to build a certain amount of housing units through his administration. That has not happened. And there's all this talk about, reforming CEQA. That's a big environmental law out here that prohibits new housing projects. That's really stalled a lot of projects here. To see that number, and a big question amongst all of the journalists here in California was how is this race going to play out in terms of the issues? Is this going to be, and we're seeing a lot of our local elections nationalized now. Is this going to be all about Donald Trump? In the beginning, the message was, okay, yes, California needs to to be a check on the administration, but we have our own issues here at home. And affordability, this place is too expensive. Nobody can afford to live here. And that was going to be at the top of the list. And it's just interesting to see kind of where voters are and then potentially reacting to what the national message is.
All right, good thoughts there. Thank you for sharing that, Spencer. Let's keep on moving. We got a couple more slides.
Well, that takes us
Um,
perfectly into the next one because we're going to
Yep.
look at a national issue and how do the Democrats handle the immigration issue coming 2026? What's interesting with immigration policy, we asked, do you support President Trump's policy or President Biden's policy? And you can see in California, they slightly favor President Biden's policy. But remember, they voted for President Biden by 25 to 30 points. So this is a very contentious issue. When we get down to those independents, the independents in California prefer the Trump policy over the Biden policy. So right now we're in the primaries and people are within their bases. But when you get to the general election, and even as we look to 28, where do the Democrats go on their immigration policy? The Republicans seem to have a policy that they're going to be able to lean into. And what I'm looking to see is what is going to be the Democratic policy on immigration as they move towards the midterms, and this comes to a boil in November, and then we start talking presidential politics again in 28. So I think that's an interesting issue that is going to be on the table for us to discuss moving forward.
Quick question, Spencer, and a quick answer. The independents favoring the Trump policy for immigration, the independents are going to make the final call on the governor's race. Is there any correlation that it provides that maybe that two-headed Republican making it through the primary?
Yeah, well, first, when we looked at Minnesota last week, they preferred Trump's policy over Biden 42-35. So we could see that in a blue state, they still liked the Trump policy. That's where the Democrats, I think, come into a rub on this issue. And when it gets to the general election, I'm not sure it's going to impact the primary for the two Republicans, which would be a shocker if they both were to be the nominees. But come the general election, I presume one of the Republicans will make that the issue, and we'll see what the Democratic nominee pivots towards for their ideology.
Well, we've hit that part of the show. Our most favorite part of the show where Spencer kind of says, you know what? I'm America's pollster, and this is what I think. So here we go. Who's up and who's down this week? So, Spence, who's up?
Who's up was a man who was down just a couple of months ago when we pulled this race, Tom Steyer. So we see Tom Steyer is picked up 5 points. You know, last time we looked at this race, he was hovering at 4, and we had him down because he had spent that money and it hadn't really moved the needle. Now it's moved the needle, so we have him up.
And you said you've got someone else who's up, and we don't do 2 ups often, but there's one more.
No, but when you see Steve Hilton pop 5 more points, and now he looks to be on that Republican side, you know, catching enough of the independents. We have him up this week. Looks like he's made a little separation with Bianco, but we'll see what happens over the next couple of months.
Let's get in who's down from you, and then we'll go to Nikki for her reaction.
Well, down this week is Katie Porter. Her campaign started off with bells and whistles, and we really expected her to go wire to wire. She stumbled out of the gate and hasn't been able to find traction. She's not out, but she's down this week.
Any final thoughts on Spencer's up and down in the polling?
Yeah, and the part I'll add another person to the down. I was a bit surprised on the numbers that the mayor of San Jose, Matt Mahan, there was a lot of excitement coming into the announcement of his candidacy. He's a Democrat who was running against Sacramento, and he's got some work to do. And this is a storyline to watch through this election. Who is going to be victorious here? Because labor unions the union power in California is so strong. They have all the money. They have the foot soldiers that can walk the precincts and knock on doors. They haven't really had a powerhouse challenger. That's tech this cycle. So we're going to see tech versus labor. And all of the tech money is behind Matt Mahan. And they plan to spend a lot of money. That's what my sources are telling me. So we're going to see this battle and if there's going to be a check on labor this election cycle.
Nikki, Thanks for being here, Spence. Always good to watch and read your numbers. This is great stuff. And I love, as I said before, I love the fusion of people on the ground and your numbers from an analytical perspective. It's a unique discussion that you can't find anywhere else, but right here on Political Power Ranker. So if you're interested in more data, go to, Political Power Ranker, follow us, and look for Spencer's polling at Emerson College Polling on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. They're out there. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.